Discover your inner goddess and live up to your highest value and most abundant potential. Welcome to Grateful Goddesses, a podcast that empowers you to unleash your inner goddess and take the leap of faith to live your best life. Your guide, Karen Pulver, joins her fellow goddesses in soulful conversations about gratitude, personal growth, authentic living, and a bevy of topics affecting women today. Let's start the show with your host, Karen Pulver.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on Grateful Goddesses. So when I was making my coffee this morning, I grabbed for one of my mugs. And today's mug says, "Of course, I talk to myself. Sometimes I need expert advice. I often do talk to my many selves, not just one self. And I believe that we all have many selves. And our guest today will talk more in depth about our many selves. Today, my self that I'd like to focus on is my open self, being open to new discoveries, new learnings, perhaps things that I'm not so familiar with. And sometimes that can be uncomfortable. It can often be uncomfortable, but that's why it's so important. It's so important to get uncomfortable because then you can tap in to that inner guidance that can create change. And who knows what it's going to be like on the other side. Right? So the only way that we can do that is to acknowledge and to witness all of the selves that we have. Now, if I'm getting that right, our guest goddess will correct me on that, but she has a book called Being Selfish. Her name is Sarah Marshank. Sarah Marshank is the founder of Selfistry, a methodology dedicated to mastering the art of being human, while integrating theory from Eastern and Western philosophy and psychology. With meditative and somatic practices, Sarah guides practitioners to discover their authentic self and purpose in life. Welcome, Sarah, to Grateful Goddesses.
Hi, Karen. Hi, listeners. Happy to be here.
Hi. So what do you think about talking to myself?
I love it. I think it's precious. I think the only thing I might tweak a little bit is the discomfort. I don't believe that it has to always be uncomfortable. I think there's a way for it to be, maybe challenging in some ways, but who isn't challenged right now? Who isn't uncomfortable on some level? So I feel like the exploration of knowing ourselves more fully, sure, it has discomfort in it, but it's also super fun and interesting.
Definitely challenging, perhaps, but I can see it's joyful too, especially when you can observe that and see how you can move forward. When we were reading your book, we discovered many different selves, many different roles that you have, many different, I don't even know the right terminology, but many different Sarahs. Can you define who those Sarahs are or how you define yourself today?
Well, I love the word role. I think it fits. We can put a lot of different words in there. We could use selves. And the way that I orient who I am in any given moment is a weaving of all of those. I like to think of the weaver analogy, especially as women, because we're natural weavers. So at any given moment, a certain self might come forward, my grandmother self, my teacher self, my wife self, my friend self, my sister self, my chef self, my gardener self. So anyone might kind of come to the forefront. But the most important question for me is, what's breathing life into that weaving, that tapestry of selfhood? And the combination of those, the fluidity of my selves and my roles, and really listening for that or tending to that breath that's breathing me, that's where the magic happens.
And for a person who feels, or what would you say to a person who says that they feel totally content with who they are and their self right now? What would you say to them?
I would say fabulous.
Do you feel that a person needs to dive deeper to figure out more, or just when there's like a dilemma or a conflict?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in my earlier life, right, when I was younger, I think I might have been more likely to say, everybody has to do this. This is what it's about. It's really important. But now, as I get more gray hair, I have a perspective that that there is no shoulds here, that everybody has their own kind of destiny and their own life movement. And if one feels called to self-explore, great. And if not, great. Now, it doesn't necessarily create for peace and harmony on the planet, but that's another question.
Exactly. I'd like to welcome our featured goddesses now to join us on the show. So Lisa would like to start with a question for you, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah. So I read the book, and it was very compelling. Your whole story was really interesting to me, how you went through a lot of different practices in your search. You went through Orthodox Judaism. You went through the monastic life for 10 years. And then I looked at on your Selfistry website, and you talk about how some of these spiritual practices may be helpful or may not have helped. So I'm interested in knowing, like, which in your journey, which practices or what parts of the practices did you find were helpful? And then how is going through a Selfistry program, let's say, how is it different? Like, how do you incorporate them? Do you incorporate, which parts do you incorporate? How do you help people incorporate it? That's what I'm interested in knowing.
That's a very rich question. So I'm going to try and, encapsulate it as best as I can. It's a beautiful question. And I think because we live in an age, so it's 2020, all of us here are women, visually at least. I don't want to make any assumptions about how you self-identify, but we are educated Western women, let's say. So we have a choice at this point in human history of so many different ways of doing pretty much everything. So what Selfistry does is it kind of simplifies into three different baskets, different aspects of our human beingness. And I would suggest that this is across the board throughout human history. There's the personality, or what I call the self. Then there's the witness or awareness. Okay. Sometimes modern mindfulness practices will fall in this basket. And then the third basket is what we call in Selfistry source, which is the mystery, the unknowable, like quote unquote spirituality. So what I do with these three baskets is I invite people to explore together. So not coming in with any assumptions of I should meditate, or I should study, or I should fast, or I should eat this diet or that diet, because we're all unique. But we all have these general baskets. So for example, in the basket of the self, there's an exploration of these different roles and different aspects of ourselves that might be traumatized or stuck or stifled, in addition to the ones that are healthy and expressive and curious. And we try to kind of reorganize that basket. It's sort of like unraveling what's here. And so therapy might be appropriate in that basket when it comes to practices. Art might be. I do some sacred theater stuff, and we do some journaling, and there's lots of different tools for sorting that basket. Very rich and very multidimensional. The witness basket or the awareness basket is really like very empty. It just has awareness in it. And it is what's cultivated through contemplation and meditation. But we have to unpack what we mean by meditation, because there's a lot of meditation practices that would fit in the self basket. to help us calm ourselves or get to know ourselves. This is a unique kind of discipline or practice. I look at it like an atrophied muscle because most of us in the West never even knew that this muscle existed, though it's ever present. And then the third basket of source, which is our spirituality or our relationship with the mystery, is also quite open and vast in how we might want to cultivate that in ourselves. So for me, for a while, it was through prayer and through keeping the Sabbath. And I love Hebrew. I speak Hebrew. I still speak Hebrew when I'm talking to Source or God or the Great Mystery. And so I have my own personal rituals that cultivate my relationship, my self relationship with Source. And those are unique to each individual. I kind of call it like your freedom to accessorize. But it's important to revisit that because I think a lot of us have belief systems which live in the realm of the self about Source, rather than a very present moment, present day experience of it or relationship to it. And I think as we kind of recalibrate that individually, something happens to us collectively because it's the same source for everybody. Does that make sense?
Does make sense. I think if I understand correctly, you're saying you don't take any one there is no specific practice that works for everybody. So you have gone through all of these different ones and you've yourself have kept the ones that you find valuable.
Correct.
Yeah. So along those lines, I'm just thinking for me personally, with Yom Kippur coming up, I am Jewish, and every year I struggle with the shoulds, the should that I need to forgive and ask for forgiveness. And it's difficult when there's a person or certain people that I personally feel that no, it's been too hurtful, too harmful, or how do we forgive? Like, I know that you talk a lot about releasing the shoulds, if I'm saying that correctly, like not allowing that to just take over our being, but it's still there in my mind. That every year I encounter this, and when I hear about people forgiving and saying, "Oh, you should forgive," it makes you feel so much more free and so much better. I don't personally feel like it would for me. So, what would you say to that?
First of all, I love your honesty. It's like, forget it. I don't want to forgive that. Bleep. He or she doesn't deserve it, right?
No, really. Yeah. It's been a lot of hurt and heartache. And I don't think that person really cares. I don't think it would change anything for that person. I think even if I did forgive that person, they would say, yeah, F you, I don't care. Right. So I'm just curious though.
Yeah. So let's go back to Lisa's question and just let's stick with the 3 baskets metaphor, because I think it's relevant. And maybe today this will help us kind of carry the conversation through. So the self, the realm of the self, that's where all the shoulds lie. So I suspect you have a self that is feeling like, F you, I don't want to forgive. I also suspect you have a self that's like, oh gosh, I wonder, like, if I could get to that place of forgiveness, then I wouldn't be so busy with this all the time, right? And
Absolutely.
Right? And maybe there's another self in there that's like, oh, this whole thing is so boring already, like I'm over it, right?
Yeah.
The journey of Selfistry is to presence all those selves, let them out. You can journal them, you can draw them, you can speak them, you can act them, whatever you do to get them all out. And then we rest in the witness. Because what happens here is the witness is what I call loving awareness. All it doesn't have any agenda. It just sees them all those other selves as real and valid, but only partial. Like none of them get to run the show. So who's running the show? Well, when I'm able to rest as awareness and see all my selves, play with me here because obviously we're all together in this skin suit called Sarah, but I'm able to kind of take a breath and just get perspective and say, okay, I guess I have mixed thoughts, emotions, and feelings and sensations here. So what's the right one for me right now? And that's where I lean into source. Because if we visualize source as going back to the tapestry, okay, if source is the tapestry that unites us all, theoretically there's a right movement in each moment from my little thread that will serve the whole tapestry without dissing any one of my selves. So what happens is over time, when I trust, and this is the seed of intuition, I would say, when I trust that intuition and let's say I get the message, forgive her. Okay. So the message is coming through to the self. So one Karen is going, I'm not doing it. No way. I don't care if that's not intuition. That's bullshit. Right. The other self is going, oh, good. Let's just do it. But how do we do it? And then you learn to trust that. And then the forgiveness comes not from the self who does or does not want to forgive, but from a deeper place of bringing coherence to a greater field. And in that regard, you can like it or not like it, but you do it because you know it's the right thing. And similarly, I just want to add, it's very possible that your intuition would tell you, let it be. Do not forgive. There's nothing to do right now. But be careful that it's not just coming from a resentful parent, right?
No, I see the distinction. My intuition is telling me forget it and move on because I feel that nothing would be accomplished. But the should in the Judaism that I do also traditionally believe in and cultivate in my family and my life is saying, no, you need to forgive. So that's like the juxtaposition of the two. But I feel like in reading about what you do, really feeling what it is that resonates with me is it's okay. Like it's okay if I witness that the self that feels best for me is to let it go. That's what I'm going to do, no matter what the should is.
And one other thing I would say to that briefly is that forgiveness and compassion are two different things for me. Mm-hmm. So I could have compassion for this person and really understand that, their behavior is coming because they're stuck in the self in some way. Mm. And so I can have compassion for them without excusing their behavior. I can understand it without excusing it. So,
well, yeah, I often say sending love and light, hopefully that will help. We're going to move on to Lara. She has some questions for you.
Hi, Sarah.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to meet you. I really, really enjoyed reading your book. And at the end, something really stood out of the page when you were explaining that our experiences in life are not really defined by the experience alone. It's by the quality of the way we experience something. And that being tied into your wisdom about how everybody has a balance of pain and joy that they bring to experiences and to the way they mesh the two together, I guess. Could you elaborate on how that balance is brought to experiencing life?
Well, for me, it's art. I don't know, balance. Sometimes I have trouble with that word because I see this static, scales that don't move, right? So for me, it's more about fluidity and agility and artistry. Selfistry is the artistry of the self. So once these three baskets get really clarified, then it's possible to just have our identity or our attention kind of flow between all three. So if any moment I see myself getting stuck in resentment or in a story about how hard it is, I'm free to go to the basket of the witness and just take a deep breath and pause and see a bigger picture and go, hey, sweetie, as much challenge as there is, there's also beauty right now in the world. Every moment, both exist. Every single moment. Even though, our ancestors, in my ancestors, at least in the Holocaust, there were people in every moment could see the beauty in the horror because they live in the realm of the self. So as I become more agile and fluid and really tend to my relationship with source, so that that bigger picture isn't just a belief, oh, the universe has my back, or the universe is all loving and kind. It may be true, but that doesn't mean there isn't suffering. But I learned to kind of toggle between the baskets. So in any given moment, and trust me, it's not necessarily easy. I get stuck in self-land too, for sure, But I remember in the moment when I'm forgetting, if I remember, or let's say I'm hanging out with you and you remember and you go, hey, Sarah, come to the witness for a moment, like you're stuck, you're spinning. Then I can unstick myself and I can find my way to, I'd like to say that the choreography brings joy, or the happiness that we long for that isn't an emotion. Like emotions are in the realm of the self and they change. We're all going to be grumpy some days, but that joy or that acceptance, like, wow, this human life is a miracle. Like even when it sucks, it's really a wonder. So to sustain that is having access to all three baskets, in my view.
Yeah, it is really, I think, an important point for people to believe in and understand, especially I think personally, I've experienced great pain. So I often will share that with my friends and family and say, it's hard to believe, but the losses and the painful moments are going to actually make you appreciate the light moments and the joy more fully. So I think it's a wonderful quality to keep that in mind on almost like more of a daily basis, to have it as part of the fabric of your life. So I think it's interesting the way you teach it.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you. I really enjoyed that.
Beautiful.
And Alyssa.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for being with us today. And I have to say, I really, really enjoyed your book. And I think Laura's question sort of leads into what I've been thinking about, which is, how do things like great pain or illness, disease, how does that really, affect the work that we do through Selfistry? And you talk in your book, for example, about having rheumatic fever as a young child and coming through that, but staying on medication for like a decade, I think you said, and feeling so fatigued and not really feeling, like something was definitely not right. And I'm sort of thinking about that because obviously many of us, we have great pain, we have illness, and, it may be hard, I would think, to really treat all of ourselves equally at that time. I mean, you just alluded to the fact that we're all the selves are valid, they're all equal, and I love kind of almost picturing, as you've done in some exercises, these selves, above your head, but they're not, but I would think there's the illness, self, the Sarah with rheumatic fever, someone with cancer, like that self is just going to bulldoze all your other selves. That self wants, top billing and will probably supersede your, your selfless self, your gracious self. I mean, that's what's going to really take precedence. So I'm wondering how that affected your own journey, your own illness, and then, speaking to others about how our physical, what we're feeling truly physically affects our ability to do the work of Selfistry.
You ladies are really throwing them at me today, aren't you? We're not messing around.
Hi, here at Grateful God.
Yeah, we want to get to know it. We are really opening up and wanting to dive deep. Thank you for trusting us with this.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, one thing you're bringing forward, Alyssa, which I think is really important, is that there will be selves that want to run the show, absolutely, and hijack the whole thing. And I would say that sick ones that where there's physical challenge are really come forward primary for many of us, because we're living in these bodies. Even though we're talking about these three baskets, it's all happening in here. And if I feel like shit, I feel like shit. So it's a beautiful question. And it speaks to kind of how the process begins to unfold over time. So it's hard to get the one that's hijacking to relax and trust in the witness and source. So that becomes the primary. I wouldn't work so much with the other selves. I would really meet that self that's suffering, and I would encourage her to take breaks and pauses and practice the meditation I teach in the witness realm so that there's just space there. Right? And then to lean into source. And the reason, especially with somebody who's suffering physically, to lean into source genuinely is because my experience there has told me that there is no such thing as you create your own illness. It's your fault, or so there's a lot of, now this is a very nuanced conversation because there is cause and effect, and there is a relationship between our physiology and our psychology and our spirituality. That's absolutely true. But how they interact with one another, and who's at fault or who's the one that's causing, is something I can feel the chills coming up, because I feel like there's a lot of disservice done in the new age communities around how to be with illness. Like sometimes a banana is just a banana. Sometimes you're just born with a genetic makeup and live in an environment where you get cancer, not because you did anything wrong. So I would meet that one who's suffering, and I would cultivate a capacity to just get distance from it and breathe. And so, from my book, for me, the most important discipline to get that shift was through fasting. Not through silence, though that helped, and stillness, though that helped. It was fasting, because it was the hardest for me, because physically I wasn't really well. So fasting was like the wrong it did for my psyche or my soul, depending on which word you want to use, was it gave me perspective. And I could both feel like shit and not feel like shit at the same time. And that was the beginning of bringing some space into my human beingness to both be okay and not okay at the same time. And then the self realm started to loosen and untangle and reorganize. And I could have one who was sick, and one who was healthy, and one who was discouraged, and one who was encouraged, and make room for all of them to be on the bus towards health and well-being. What that looks like for this body and this 57-year-old woman in this moment in time. Not what it looks like in Alyssa or Lisa or Lara or Karen. Super important.
There is so many illnesses that I've been reading about that the New Age says, like even eczema. My daughter has eczema, and I remember when she was younger reading about, it's because she's nervous or she's anxious, and I'm like, she's not actually. So that's interesting, because a lot of New Age does say that. And then you feel like, well, why did I get cancer? Why did I have a heart attack? Why did this happen? To look at that. That's interesting.
So heartbreaking, yeah.
Alyssa, does that answer your question?
It does. And we've had, such an amazing array of guests on the show, and we've actually talked a lot about, spiritual self-healing, but not of just sort of the psyche, right? Of like real disease, forms of cancer. And I'm not really sure where I come out on that. I'd be kind of interested in your thoughts. In all honesty, a lot of it does feel New Agey to me, and not just about sort of the cause of the cancer or the cause of the disease, but sort of, I think to me, I live my life in moderation in many ways, and I feel like a combination of Western and Eastern medicine is probably the good way to go. You never know, hedge your bets and see what helps, but I'm not sure how I feel, and I'm wondering your thoughts about kind of spiritual healing.
Well, if we presume that all throughout human history, humans have been animals and personalities and some sort of mysterious, energetic manifestation that none of us really understands. Okay, science are calling us, quarks and gluons now, as if they know what those are, right? So I feel like kind of what we're up against now is if we recognize that there is a relationship between the unknown or the mystery and what we think we know or what we can touch and feel and experience, right? So in Eastern, it would be called like the formless and the form, right? Matter and spirit, energy and matter. So there's always been this dichotomy, if you will, between the mystery or the spiritual and the known, or what now is being called psychological. And so if it's true that there is some relationship between in selfistry, source, and self, then the question is can we be more consciously engaged in that relationship? And there are many stories, like in Eastern traditions, where that relationship was really tended to. Okay. In Western, what I discovered in the Western world, though that's changing now, is, and Lisa alluded to this, in the Native American practices that I did, where they were tethered to nature and mystery or source in the manifestation of nature, and they tended to that relationship. So as we all know, if we tend to relationships, whether it's with our beloveds or our children or our neighbors or our pets or ourselves, things happen. Right? And we start to feed each other in this mysterious dance of relationship. So a lot of what Selfistry is about is recalibrating that relationship. And how that's going to recalibrate for you might look different than how it will for Laura, right? But the two pieces that you're wanting to recalibrate are the same universally. And so I suggest that where some of us trip and get confused is when we get stuck in either one. So I'm all about upcycling, like let's recycle and upcycle all the good stuff from Judaism and Buddhism and, Native Americanism without appropriating, because that's an issue now too. But we're not appropriating when we're really tending to our relationship with Source. And you can feel the difference. When you meet somebody who's putting on a headdress and pretending to be a Native American, and somebody who's shaking a rattle and who's connected, we all can feel it. When they hook up, it's just magic.
Laura has a question regarding, actually, we know that, Sarah, you're a grandma. So Laura we were talking the other day about our kids, and Laura has a question regarding that.
So right now, it's definitely a question about the younger generation, and how you might inspire them. But I think it will relate to all of us. In our world today, we're faced with technology, the burden of watching the people around us being addicted to technology. And especially for Generation Z, who they were born with computers, Facebook, and social media, in their lives. How do you give advice to, I guess specifically to the younger generation, of really, how do you instill that it's important to unwind and have that downtime?
I think it's a different approach and conversation with each person and definitely each generation, but certainly also each person and where they're, so initially I speak to the self that's presenting. Right? So if I have somebody, so let's take my grandchildren. So my 10-year-old granddaughter, she's the oldest. And then I have an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old. So Edie's the 10-year-old, and she was born reciting the periodic table at birth. She's like this total nerd science geek. She's already coding. So she's tethered to technology, and obviously from the very beginning. So for her, it's a different approach, because her it's not the technology that is the issue. It's the she that's going to be relating and using and playing with that technology. So my tendency with her, for example, is to get to know her, to not should her or judge her or make any preconceived decisions about how much technology she should be doing, when, where, and how, but really being present with her as a unique self, witness, and source, and tending to the cultivation of all three baskets for her. So for example, for her, we can sit on the couch and read together and then I can feel energetically starting to breathe together and have the witness come forward without even naming it. And without even having to say to her, because she loves to read also, without having to say, get off your Kindle, here's a paperback book, right? And similarly, I can say, let's go for a walk or let's go outside and play. And then we're in the wonder of nature, which is also super fascinating to her, because it's her that's excited about the wonder of the universe. Technology is in her field. That's wondrous for her. But so is the tree creating 8,000 plums on it. And then we'll watch, a documentary about that the universe is how many billions of years old. So really, I think if we can, reignite the wonder and the curiosity about what it means to be human in 2020 and looking towards the future and dealing with the ethics and the moralities and the existential crisis that we are all facing as a species and individually right now. And the more genuinely we can do our own recalibrating and then bring that into every relationship, the more we can trust that it will sort itself out and Edie will find her way without me, prescribing it. And I'll just add one other thing is I'm her grandmother and not her mother. So that also gives me a unique position to bring this kind of teaching to her. Whereas a mother, I might be more inclined to say, okay, you get 2 hours on the iPad today and that's it. You decide when. So I just want to also presence that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I know those two different roles of mother, grandmother. However, I think you hit the nail on the head with the should, because all of my adult children we have this dialogue all the time that there are some amazing benefits to technology, but when the addiction comes into play, it's hard to see that. So the shoulds at the beginning when they're younger, I think, the pressure of the should, taking that off will help. And it's a challenge, but I like that idea.
I know that, Laura, you are a very good example, though, to your kids. Laura often, when she has family dinners, she's not on her phone and her husband's not on his phone. And they may have their phones, but then they put it away. I've seen that. So I think us being examples to our adult children definitely helps for them to see the benefit of being present.
That part will get edited out. But anyway, so speaking of technology, I know you live in California and kind of the hotbed of tech companies, and I know that you do a lot of consulting for companies, and I would suspect, I know eBay is one of them. Aging, now the bringing it a little older, we were just talking about kind of our kids and our grandkids. Now I'm thinking about sort of, millennials and Gen Zs and all these people who are out there and working. And I'm trying to understand, what are you seeing for these people, and their roadblocks, their conflicts, and in your work with them, how does their personal growth with you translate to professional growth in their work and therefore make them better employees? Maybe it's so much personal growth they think, I'm out of here, and they leave eBay or whatever company they're working with. But I'm just curious about what you've observed in your work with these employees.
Yeah, it is pretty much what you just pointed towards, is that so eBay takes a risk when they bring in somebody like me, and I encourage them to take it for the benefit of the company, because here's the deal. When you have people who are working for you who are passionate about being there, and this is definitely a rising issue among the next generation. I have a 25-year-old stepdaughter who I'm very close with, and watching her in her career track, these younger kids, many of them, and probably you have children that age as well, is they are really wanting to have meaningful lives and meaningful work. And so what I do when I go into, let's say, working with individuals in eBay is I get these young people to like really start recalibrating in these 3 baskets and tell the truth about what's really meaningful and important to them, and to not compromise that, and to be willing to explore the different dimensions of their selfhood, conflicting desires. Well, I want to make a lot of money, but I'm willing to compromise, and money's not that important, but I kind of want to work near home, and how to sort through the complexity of making these kinds of important life decisions. These are not like, oh, an overnight insight. These take time to actually explore and inquire and to unearth what is the intuition, what is the should, what is authentically mine or genuinely mine, even to the point where that young person says, oh, I shouldn't be working at eBay, and eBay loses some of their employees, right? It's okay if we're all finding our genuine connection to what brings us alive. I just feel that's better for everybody in the long haul. So that's how it ends up playing out pretty much.
And I would think eBay doesn't want somebody working for them that, you know, doesn't really get any sense of fulfillment or joy. They'd rather find somebody else.
I mean, maybe other companies might not have that position. They might be like, I don't care if you're happy here, do the job.
Let's do it. Laura, did you want to add to that?
I had a question, Sarah. Do you work with Selfistry with younger women in their mid-20s? Because I was telling my daughter about the book, suggesting it for her book club, which she started with her friends just recently when they were all in lockdown. And I think it would be really, really eye-opening for that age group. But I think do you work with that age?
I have, it's interesting, as you know from my story. So when I came out of retreat, so it's been like 15 years now. So Selfistry is young, is new. The business and the brand, in the sense of putting together everything I learned in a way that I could then share. My training is as an educator. So I really feel that's what I do well. I understand pedagogy, and I understand developmental, theories, and I understand how kids learn and how people learn. And I'm really just wanting to create an environment for discovery. That said, in order to enter into the Selfistry ecosystem, you have to already be wondering, like, who am I?
Yeah.
And it takes usually until the Saturn return, which is in the late 20s, right, for that to get ignited. Now, that said, I'm co-teaching a freshman seminar at UC Berkeley this semester on ethics and the existential crisis of our time. And there's 19-year-olds in that class that are so intelligent and awake and alive. It's so delightful for me to just be with them and to just listen and explore with them. So I also have a longtime student who wants to write a children's book, a Selfistry children's book. So I would say that for anybody who's curious about figuring out more of the nuance and the complexity of who we are and having that complexity simplified, Selfistry could be a great fit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Lisa, did you have another question that you wanted to ask that's not necessarily on the ones that we had discussed?
I am interested actually in your how you went into the field of teaching originally. I'm a teacher, so that sort of stood out to me as well. And when you described the alternative education, I sort of thought, wow, because I am sort of at a crossroads now where I'm not working because of COVID. I don't want to have an exposure. I did go through trying to train myself to do Zoom teaching and things like that. So that is a kind of alternative education. So I was just interested in, you said now you're teaching a freshman course. So has that all come back to you? Or, you didn't use it for a while, or I guess you did, but you sort of put it on hold, and now you kind of rejected that job originally. You walked away from a job. Now it's sort of a full circle. How do you feel about that?
I think it's so mysterious and beautiful, actually. And it does speak to that there is a choreography of the self in each one of us that is unique, and it has its own kind of constitution and uniqueness. And I feel like, my archetype that I came in with was teacher, right? So one of the things we really do in Selfistry is we stop trying to be something other than we are, and we just try to enhance what we are while recognizing our limits. And so it's not surprising to me, even though I never would have imagined it working out this way, right? It's not surprising to me that I'm teaching again. I love it. And I miss the classroom, and I miss, so if you come on retreat with me, which I invite you all to do, once COVID settles and gets more into the fabric of how we're going to be together, gathering, I teach or I facilitate, right? So there's, again, am I a teacher or facilitator? It'd be fun to have a deeper conversation with you about how we define those roles and what they mean. But alternative education for me back when I was 25 and in grad school means, going back to like Rudolf Steiner and Maria Montessori, is we create an environment for the spirit or soul or magic of the child to emerge. We don't impose shoulds on them, but we create structure and we create limits. And so for me, that's the ecosystem. It's a learning ecosystem of Selfistry. And that structure is there, but there's freedom to roam. And the other thing I would say is that Selfistry has a somatic or a body-based practice that I can only do in person with people. I've tried it on Zoom and it sort of works, and it's just, so I'm just like, forget about it. We're not going to do that now. Those people who have learned it are doing it on their own, but there's something about coming together and doing it with our bodies. We take our bodies through the three realms, basically, in the three baskets, and get insights like you wouldn't believe. A full circle.
Just full circle being a teacher.
I just wanted to know your thoughts on teaching. For me as a teacher, I do see it as a kind of a calling or an archetype of my life. And that's why it is kind of hard for me to not be teaching right now, or to not find a way to do it. So I wanted to know your thoughts on how you have kind of come back to it.
Yeah, well, I feel like for you, like I would encourage you to just be in the pause, right? So
yeah, well,
and do the recalibrating and lean into source and say, okay, where do you want me to go next? What's next? And listen and then try stuff on, you never know what's going to fit. And I've been teaching on Zoom for a while, and I think that it has potential to be a great adjunct to our learning, just like technology again, it's how we use it. So, but it does take some time getting used to, for sure. Well, if Lisa, I don't know if you feel willing, but would you play with me a little bit around teaching and what's next for you? And we can just use that as a little mini example. Okay, again, you're going into a classroom, and imagine the classroom has a lot of different options and ways to learn. That's Selfistry. What we're going to do right now is just one way of playing with the three realms or the three baskets. Okay, so the first place I would start, and I understand time-wise, we want to kind of condense this. So just imagine, Lisa, we would spend more time with this. But for right now, can you just close your eyes, or if it works for you to keep your eyes open, that's fine, and access for us the different selves around your role as a teacher, and see who's there. And see, there may be only one, there may be two or three, there may be dozens, but see if you can get two or three of them just to speak about like who they are, how old they are, and what they're wanting regarding your role as a teacher. Mm-hmm. And can you share those with us?
Well, I think I've gone through different stages as a teacher. So those would be the three, sort of the different teacher selves.
Okay.
I was inexperienced, but I had a lot of energy at one point. And then I was sort of like a substitute teacher while I was also raising my kids. So I wasn't 100%. I was like sort of holding the fort for other teachers. And then I really had a great job recently, actually. So I really put a lot of work into it, and I had to I had been teaching older kids, but this job was teaching very young kids. So it was a completely new experience, and I had to relearn everything. So I was experienced.
Nice.
With a little less energy.
Great. So tell me if this is true. I heard one that's really passionate, right? One that, kept the toe in the door and was just kind of steadily absorbing and input and output. And then one who feels like more experienced and capable and confident.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So right now we've identified 3 Lisas, so to speak. And I suspect that there are other Lisas in there, one who doesn't want to ever work again in her life and wish she was and just wealthy and could retire maybe on a beach or in the mountains somewhere. So there's other voices inside her as well. But what we invited forward was the teacher voices. Now, I'd like you to imagine that those 3 selves, along with all the other Lisas, the ones who, all of them, and they're like a cacophony of them, if we tell the truth about it. So now imagine they're all in a house together, okay? And I would like for you to just walk through the house and wave and say hello to them. And then I want to invite you to imagine that you're going downstairs into the basement, okay? So yeah, nice. If you can close your eyes. So the passionate Lisa's up there, the one who's kind of holding space, the young one, the older one, the one who doesn't want to work at all. They're all up there and they're in different rooms, or they're playing with each other, or they're not playing with each other. They're doing whatever they're doing. And you are walking or driving or taking an elevator downstairs into the basement, and there's a chair there, and it's a recliner, and it's your favorite color. And I'm going to invite you to just get on that recliner, recline, and just breathe. And as you let your body, imagine your body just kind of sinking into the chair, you can gently open your eyes and look up, because the ceiling is glass. And from this recliner, you can see all yourselves, all of them. And here you are, breathing in the chair, observing. Loving them, accepting them. You're downstairs, you can hear them in the background, but no big deal. Nothing, they're not burning down the house. You can just rest in the recliner. And this we call the witness, right? This is the place that can just observe all ourselves without being identified as any of them, just for a moment. Can't stay here forever. And this is not the totality of who you are, but there is an aspect of you that can just observe yourself. And so I would encourage you to stay there for a while and come back and visit whenever you feel caught up in, should I, shouldn't I don't know. Just come and breathe. And then I would encourage you and invite you, as you tap into the breath, this is one of my favorite questions. It's so simple and so mysterious, is to ask the question, who or what is breathing me? Who or this is where you start to tap into the mystery and into source. What is it that is breathing me alive? And without it being a cognitive exploration, the cognitive is wonderful. I'm a big head girl, but I'm also inviting us to go into a more, intuitive, somatic, energetic realm without collapsing into woo-woo. I can't stand woo-woo, okay? So to be able to relax as the witness and to just breathe and observe yourself, then lean into source, whatever that looks like for you. And then go back upstairs, hang out with yourselves again, and then leave the house and go into your life and see what's changed. So that's a very condensed exercise that you can do to just kind of orient yourself in all 3 of the baskets. And I think for our modern age, some people say to me, well, which one should I focus on more? And I say to people, well, I took 10 years and just focused on source. The witness came as a consequence of that. I don't necessarily recommend that. Even though if you have the opportunity, you may choose that. I wouldn't recommend that. What I would say is spend time in all 3. Create a lifestyle where you weave throughout your day time to tend to the mystery, to tend to your own pause, and relaxation and breathing, and to tend to your unique selfhood and your unique needs and limitations, and accepting and loving yourself in that way. And then see what emerges.
With anyone in your family, do you have any regrets when you look back at your journey?
Yeah, regrets. That's such an interesting thing, right? There was also a question about guilt that came up, that I wanted to explore with you too. I would say my foundation is really gratitude for everything that has unfolded. And if I could go back to do it differently, the one thing I would do differently is how I engage with my family in the process of isolating for those 10 years. I really felt the sincerity of my longing to include them. And I, over the years, I would reach out and I would write letters, and I don't know, I think it was just too weird for them maybe, or too incomprehensible. And I didn't understand how it was incomprehensible to them. There was just this, you ever have somebody you're doing this with, we just weren't meeting. So, and that's a lot of now when it's like the grandmother in me. I wish I would have had a grandmother like me, so that I wouldn't have had to treat my family the way that I did. It was so hard on my mom, bless her heart, bless her soul, so that is the one thing I would have done differently. Nothing else. I don't regret not having children. I don't regret having those 10 years alone and quiet. I feel really grateful for the beauty in my life and where I am now. So, but that one piece.
No, thank you for sharing that, because
I just wanted to add.
Go ahead, Laura.
Well, first, what stands out is when you just touched upon choreography in your life, and it seems like the choreography has come full circle, and I just love that. It's, you take all of your life, and all of us are going to have regrets, and we question every day. Did I say the right thing? Did I do the right thing? Are my relationships going to suffer? It's beautiful to see when it comes together in the end. And I think that's what everyone hopes for. But I was going to say, technology would have helped back in the day when you were doing your thing, because I do find that if people have challenges communicating with different family members or friends, that maybe, texting and a quick message here and there is much easier for people to express their feelings.
Yeah.
For people who aren't, able to have deep.
That's true.
So who knows? It's just interesting to think about.
That's a beautiful point. Yeah. I wanted to actually, if I can, just say one other thing.
Of course. I don't want to take up your time, but thank you. Go ahead.
No, I'm good. I'm good till noon. Yeah.
Go ahead.
One of the things I wanted to say was, I don't know if you've watched the documentary, The Social Dilemma, that's been streaming on Netflix.
We've been talking about that.
Good.
Laura just told me to watch it.
Yeah, it's fabulous. And I'll send this to you. There was, if you've seen it, so Russell Brand did a little like 15-minute, he's going to have all those people on his show, and he's a really interesting character. I don't know if you've listened to him at all, but one of the things he said when he was talking about that documentary, and he's been in recovery for a long time. He's a recovering addict. And I have many students who have come to me through the recovery I think, I think AA is a beautiful system. I think it has its problems, but I think in general, it's done us so much good for our generation. But one of the things Russell said was, he said, listen, talking about addiction to technology, he said, I'm an addict. I've been in recovery. I've been addicted to substances, to pornography, to sex. What I have done is I have not laid down my addiction to any of those things. I have laid down the self that wants those things. And that distinction, I was like, that's it right there. That's it right there. And that self and that self-awareness is what, thousands of years of Eastern traditions are offering to us, and what the esoteric traditions of our own traditions are offering us. And what mindfulness in the best of ways is offering to us is to wake up to a vaster self that can put that self down without demonizing it, without making it wrong, without punishing it, shaming it, just say, sit down, honey, you're going to get in the back of the bus. I'm driving now. This self is driving. So I encourage you to check them out and just,
I don't know. I got goosebumps hearing that. Like that struck such, whoa.
Right?
What, you guys or just me? I'm like,
that is, without shame and regret is key there, because that's what people need to understand. It's a hard,
because otherwise it takes over. Yeah, who's driving your bus? Who's the one conducting the show? Who is the person in charge?
That's right.
I love that so much of what you teach and what we've been talking about in some ways simplifies all of this by being able to visualize things, whether it's Lisa, sitting in that chair and looking up, and all the visuals. People may come to their own decisions or work through their own conflicts in a lot of ways, many of which are very esoteric. But I think when you condense it down to this sort of these physical manifestations of these selves, I think that's so helpful. Physically, like the act of laying down oneself, kind of putting that self to pasture.
I'm excited you're saying this, Alyssa, because Alyssa is very A-type. I'm putting, and you are like this or this, and wow, good for you.
Well, I am, but I'm also very visual. And
yes, true.
Sometimes it's having all these sort of thoughts and reading a book and concepts that get very confusing and muddy things up. But I'm also a very simple person. You sort of like tell me to visualize something and I can visualize something. So I think that approach that you employ in your teaching has got to be incredibly helpful in, assisting the people who come to you with how do I do this? How do I put my guilt or my regrets, my whatever it is, you literally have to physically put them out in the trash.
Not in the trash, in the back of the bus.
Back of the bus. I say the back of my orchestra.
Back of your orchestra. Who's the guy?
In the lobby or the street.
And what happens over time is they're actually happy to be on the bus. They only picked up that addiction to protect you, to get you love, to feel good, to stop hurting, So over time, they just start to relax and trust those self that's come forward to drive the bus. And it's quite beautiful. And there are moments, there are moments when, they reel their head again and want to take over, and it can be hard. It definitely can be hard. There is never any, like, you're finished, you're arriving, you're perfect. You don't, not that I have found. So even the Dalai Lama says he gets angry sometimes, but.
True. Lisa, did that help?
Well, I'm going to have to see, right? I'm sure it's not something that you right away feel. Yeah.
And that's a good point. We we're taught that we should be 10 easy steps to authenticity or enlightenment. It's like, how about creating a lifestyle and giving it space to grow? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for doing that, for sharing that with us. If our viewers and listeners want to contact you to perhaps do one-on-ones, do the monthly gathering, or in fact take your courses, or when time does open, where the world opens up again to go on retreat, how can they do that?
So the best way to learn more about this work is to do my online live course via Zoom, which I run 3 times a year, and it's 5 weeks long. So you get videos, and we get together and we hang out and we explore this. And it's a great way to learn the framework. And so I run that 3 times a year, in the fall, in the winter, and then in the spring. So just check my website, Selfistry, Selfistry, the Artistry of the Self.com. And then from there, there's a few different routes that you can take. And I'm always available for a free talk, just book a 25-minute consult with me and tell me what you're up to. There's a lot of great teachers out there that are teaching this integrative approach and that are weaving together spirituality and science and bringing it to a more modern, gestalt. Selfistry may not be the right fit for you, but I might be able to just help you orient towards what could be a better fit.
And before we say goodbye to you, we have to know how Steve is doing.
My beloved husband, bless his heart. Can you imagine? He is, well, actually right now he's on his way from Atlanta to Los Angeles. He's CEO of a company that he's working really hard for right now. And maybe one day you'll all get to meet him. He's just a wonderful human being, flawed in the most remarkable and beautiful ways, but very much grounded in this journey that we're talking about here. And so with that as the foundation of our marriage, it's.
Do you know where Sam is or what he's doing, or do you care?
I love him dearly.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like what we had and what he created an opportunity for me to do was such a gift. Now and maybe this is another podcast conversation. Yeah. Certainly things I may have done differently, but I have nothing but love and respect for that man, and no, I have not seen him.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us and for teaching us so much. And we hope that people who are listening and watching will connect with you, because I know I have, even just for the monthly gatherings, and not just meeting you, but meeting other people from everywhere has been so enriching for me in my life. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Up next, favorite things. Opening up to happiness and joy.
So welcome to Favorite Things with our guest, Sarah Marshank. We're going to start with Lisa. What did you bring along?
This is a fountain pen. And where I taught for 2 years previous to this, it was in a school for kids mostly from France, whose parents are working in the United States. And in the French education system, children about grade 2, they learn, their handwriting is extremely important. Now that's something we grew up with, probably most of us, and maybe some of you remember when you were in 2nd grade and you were able to do cursive, you were allowed to have a ballpoint pen. I remember that. And I noticed that these children, I mean, my own children, forget it. They don't know how to do cursive. So when they do a signature, it's just with hand, with printing. So I noticed that my students, they all got a special pen, like their parents would buy them, this fountain pen, which I don't know if you can see it. It's a very simple thing. You would think, big deal, what do you write with? I mean, you grab whatever you want to grab. And I decided I wanted to have one of these. So I got myself a whole bunch of them, really just a couple of them. This is my favorite though. I like the colors. And it just makes writing anything, like if I write a shopping list or if I write something in my calendar, it's a very kind of weird, I can't explain it. It's a pleasure to write with it. I like how the ink flows out. And now I reach for this pen just to do anything. I mean, I'm scribbling somebody's phone number, scribbling a note. So I just thought it's a nice, fun pleasure in life to do mundane things with this very, which I call my very fancy pen. It has a cartridge.
I love it.
It's not, the old way, obviously, not a calligraphy pen, but it's got a little cartridge. They still make them. They're mostly, I think, made in France, and you get them on Amazon. There's a whole bunch of different ones. They have different colored inks. So this is my favorite thing, really.
Thank you for sharing that. That's what it's all about. Like if when you're thinking about what makes you happy, what brings you joy every day. And that's so simple. I love that. Mm-hmm. Alyssa, what did you bring today?
Before I get to mine, Lisa, I'll just tell you, I miss those penmanship classes that we all took, because not only can my kids not write in cursive, they can't read it either. They would give me letters that their grandmother wrote to them and make me translate. Yes. Okay, so mine today, Laura reminded me that I always have one of these on my wrist, but it is these like amazing, we all have long hair. I'm looking around and the whole ponytail thing, and especially now when we're all staying at home and But these are like these incredible ponytail holders. It's like my jewelry. I wear it on my wrist every day. They are called, and you can get them like literally at like Walgreens or CVS or, you know, anywhere online. Amazon has them, and I buy them like in bulk. And right, they don't grip your hair. They don't make marks in your hair. It's like this amazing little discovery for, you know, $5.
And they're cute. They're cute bracelets too.
And they make my, like, they're constantly on my wrist. So that's my jewelry for every day.
Thank you. Lara.
Okay, I have to make comments. First of all, Lisa, I need that pen, and I am aging myself, but pens I've always enjoyed what you're saying, the flow of the ink. And lately, my fingers, even though I consider myself in very good shape, I need a very easy pen to write with. So I'm going to try that because I feel my fingers are getting a little stiff. And that hair elastic I have. And it's for my home chef moments. I'm always putting my hair back because I can't have hair when I'm cooking. So anyway, I enjoy those things also. But lately, this is my favorite thing. It's a hot chocolate made with cacao and reishi mushrooms. And it's by Four Sigmatic. And I'm just in love with this drink. It's something to have before bed. The reishi mushrooms are supposed to promote relaxation and liver cleansing. So there's healthy properties in them. And funny enough, I decided to talk about this and wasn't thinking about Sarah and your role as a grandmother. And on the top of the box, it says like a warm hug from your grandma on the box. So anyway, I highly recommend, and it helps my sleep.
What are they called, Lara? What's it called?
Well, Four Sigmatic makes all different types of, there's a coffee, but this one, it's called Mushroom Cacao Mix.
I want that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so before we go to Sarah, I'll tell you mine. And mine actually, you know, Sarah, we do favorite things every show, and we're starting to feel like we're going to like run out. But the whole point of it is to find every day something, you know, that will be positive to you. But I had to go back in my memory to when I was younger. And one of my favorite things to do was to spy on my older sister. I loved spying on her. She's here today. Lisa's my sister, if you didn't know. Surprise, surprise. Lisa, I used to read her diary. I used to listen in, you know, you pick up the phone and put your hand over. And I used to listen to her life and her talking to her boyfriends. And I even snuck down. This is how invested I was on spying on her. She was having a party. And before the party, like maybe half an hour before the party, I snuck down and I hid behind the black recliner that was in the basement. And I stayed there. And I got stuck there because her friend, who I won't name, was making out with a guy sitting on his lap with her tube top on. And he was busy putzing around, and I was little, and I was stuck behind the recliner.
Wait, you had a recliner in the basement of your house?
Yeah, that's when it was. Yeah, it was.
You got it right.
Oh, yeah, yes, and when you were doing that with her, I was imagining you being in our house growing up in that recliner, but I was stuck behind that, and I couldn't leave until I think she discovered me. Right? Did she? And she went and told you that your sister is here and
I don't
get her out of here.
I have no memory of this.
But what I wanted to share was that, Lisa, I'm sorry for reading your diary. Please forgive me, although it was so much fun.
Of course they do.
I love you. I'm grateful to you. Thank you for coming today because I really wanted you to meet Sarah and I wanted you to hear and to meet the other goddesses. I'm sending you this journal. This is a new diary for you. It's called Happy Bitch Journal. Achieve happiness, realize your greatness, stop giving a flying beep, pluck, pluck. Okay, I'm shipping it to you today, and I promise that next time I come to visit you, I will find it and I will read it.
No, okay. I actually have the old one that you used to read, so I have it. We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
I have a question, Lisa. Did you know she was spying on you?
Yeah,
Okay.
I did.
Because I have a younger sister, and she just recently also kind of, confessed, when you were gone, I used to go in your room and put on your clothes. I just looked up to you so much. I was like, you did? I was clueless. So
I remember sitting in my closet listening in when my parents were talking to her about a boyfriend that she was breaking up with, and I was really listening to that one.
got it.
Okay, too much information. But anyways, Sarah, what is your favorite thing today?
My favorite thing is a basket of knitting. And so the reason this is my favorite thing is, number one, my mother taught me how to knit when I was really little. She's now not alive anymore, and I'm so grateful. So I feel like knitting connects me to my mother and to my matriarchal ancestry, all the weavers. It's interesting, we had baskets and weaving today. So the one thing is just the connection to my people. This yarn is eco yarn, so it's cashmere, and it's 50% recycled and 50% virgin. So I love that it is, environmentally friendly. No animal or human died in order for this to come here. And it's so soft, and it's so yummy, and it's so fun to work with. And then the knitting, this is just a test patch. I'm going to be knitting a scarf for my husband, who just turned 70, and it's going to have 70 stitches on it. And so each stitch, I'm going to just stitch my love into this scarf for him. He wanted me to make him a sweater, but that's too much, too big of a project. It might not fit when I'm done. And that leads me to the other thing is I love knitting because it's a meditation for me. It's a way for me to just be in that recliner and breathing. Because sometimes people, to get to the witness, it's really hard. So I try to help people find activities. People say, I can't sit still, I need to move. I'm like, okay, let's find a movement that can bring stillness internally. And knitting does that for me. So to my ancestors and my mother and my husband and alpacas and all 4 of you for being woven into my heart and into the sisterhood.
Oh, thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you for joining us and for sharing your favorite things. Thank you.
Unleashed your inner goddess yet? Thanks for joining us today on Grateful Goddesses. We invite you to visit our website, www.gratefulgoddesses.com, to access today's show notes as well as other helpful resources. Don't forget to leave a review. Until next time, stay strong and empowered to be a grateful goddess.